Hey, what's going on? This is the Body Punch Podcast. My name is Naz. At the beginning of 2020, I was in shock and I was in fear that we might not get the UFC or any mixed martial arts at all, or what we're used to. The UFC having a track record of putting fights on almost every weekend now. Right now we're having a little bit of a break in fights, but we're so used to seeing them come out with solid cards back to back to back. No matter what everybody says about having so many fights, because there's two camps in this. Some people say they don't like the fact that we have so many fights in 1 year. I don't know if this is true, but I saw an Instagram post and it was saying that in the year 2020, if you wanted to buy every single pay-per-view, it was going to be around $1,000. And then on top of that, you got to pay the $6 ESPN Plus subscription. That's crazy. So there's one camp that's like that, where they say we shouldn't have so many fights. We should wait, build up the anticipation of a UFC card. And then there's some people that say, no, I like the amount of fights that we have. And I'm in that camp. Because this is not the same UFC and this is not the same sport of MMA that we once had. The quality of fights wasn't at the same level as it is now. Now you can turn on the UFC at any point on Saturday night and see quality fights with top level athletes. At one point we were asking, when are the top level athletes going to join the UFC? When are they going to join MMA in general? I don't think we're at the point where we see LeBron James caliber athletes in MMA. But we're getting up there and we're seeing that it takes a lot to be in mixed martial arts these days, because we're getting some quality fights with some quality fighters. That's what we saw in the year 2020. Quality. And I would say, especially when it comes to the UFC, someone that didn't back down to the challenges that COVID presented. And it seems like the UFC in particular is gearing up for an amazing 2021. So I watched an interview where the Schmo interviewed Dana White. I thought this was really interesting, and I really needed to make a podcast about this because they went into a lot of topics that's going to shape 2021. And I wanted to run through all of the topics that they discussed because I feel like they're going to be super important. With this lull happening in the UFC, a lot of news is coming out. A lot of people are producing content. The Mac Life came out with a bunch of interviews with Conor McGregor's team. The UFC is coming out and has posted a year wrap-up with the likes of DC and Michael Bisping. A lot of content is being generated. But this right here, this interview, it answered a lot of questions for me. So let's start. The first thing I wanted to talk about in this interview was the schmo ass Dana White. Is Khabib giving up the lightweight strap to the winner of Poirier versus McGregor? Dana White mentioned that there was a mistranslation that occurred. Khabib wasn't actually wanting to give up his belt. He was saying that Poirier and McGregor, whoever wins out of them, is going to fight him for the belt. That's really interesting. Because a lot of us, myself included, would love to see McGregor and Khabib go at it again. I want to see if McGregor's challenges that he talked about, because I don't want to say excuses, because the stuff that he brought up was stuff like his leg being injured. That's a big one. For a guy with the movement that Conor McGregor has, that's a big one. He just didn't seem the same. And I know I should analyze this and look at it from a really technical perspective. But sometimes you just got to see something for what you see it as. At that point, I didn't see the Conor McGregor that rose up in the featherweight division, went to 155, got that belt in dominant fashion. But hey, this might be Khabib just being Khabib and dominating his opponent. But I think that's the question we need answered. But this is a fight, and we're in the fight game, and anything can happen. Poirier could win. Poirier could go in with a different game plan. But it's just, the fact is, when I saw Khabib and McGregor fight, Conor McGregor just didn't look the same, just like I just said. That's why I want to see that fight really badly, just to answer the questions. And it's good too, because we want to test Khabib Nurmagomedov. We want the doubters to stop whining or complaining, and we'll figure out if the true winner won that night, or if Conor McGregor can win by using his talents, using his striking ability, and his underrated wrestling and jiu-jitsu. A lot of people mentioned after the Khabib fight how underrated Conor McGregor's wrestling was. Even his grappling. People were mentioning that his grappling looked a lot better than what they assumed it was. He was using some really great techniques in that fight. First of all, he got gassed. Who knows when it comes to that injury? And with the cardio that I mentioned at the start, who knows if he trained properly? Because that was at the point when Proper 12 was just starting off. And it was at the point where it might have affected him. But who knows? Those are all answers. And those are all things that Dana White mentioned. When it came to Khabib fighting the winner of Poirier and McGregor. And this was a really fun one. Some of you guys might have listened to my previous podcast about Michael Chandler. The fact is, I love the way that he fights. He brings it every single time. And how can you not get motivated when watching Michael Chandler train? This guy's an animal when he trains. It's really fun to watch. Highly recommended if you don't follow him on Instagram. Because some of the stuff that he does is just flat out ridiculous. Anyways, Dana White just confirmed that they were going to have Michael Chandler fight Alex Oliveira. That fight didn't happen because of weight issues on Oliveira's part. And then they came out with this fun fight that really tests Michael Chandler and shows us if he belongs in the UFC. Dana White mentioned that he wants Michael Chandler and Dan Hooker to fight. Now, looking at the comments and looking at the description of this video, the Schmo mentioned that it's not 100% confirmed yet. But then also mentioned Michael Chandler fighting on Fight Island. So I believe no matter what happens to this fight, Michael Chandler will be fighting on Fight Island. Who knows when and where, or all of those kind of details. But it's great to see Michael Chandler really start and get involved and become a part of this picture. All of the weight classes have some sort of story. The 155-pound division has one of the most interesting stories in UFC history. We got this Shark Tank. We got all these killers in one weight class who we don't know who is going to take the spot of one of, or maybe the most dominant fighter in the UFC's history. We're trying to find out who's going to take Khabib Nurmagomedov's spot. Because it's clear, Khabib is at the top. There's no question about that. Whoever he fights, he totally dominates. Even people who we feel have a real chance against Khabib get dominated. And by having Michael Chandler in this weight class, we'll figure out, and by having him fight, we'll figure out where he fits into this. Because Dan Hooker, from no fault of his own, is not regarded, in my opinion, as one of the top rated fighters in the 155 pound division. But I really believe he is. He's a guy that has range. He's a guy that's massive for that weight class. And if you look at him and the way that he trains with Adesanya and how he's able to keep up, I haven't really seen him go, obviously, toe-to-toe with him, their teammates. But by seeing the training footage and by seeing the fact that they actually do stuff together, like they do a little bit of grappling together and they might strike a little bit. They might touch each other up a little bit. But just to know that Adesanya is comfortable and is willing to use Dan Hooker as a training partner shows me that he's massive for that weight class. We're talking about a guy in Adesanya who we're going to talk about later is fighting Blachowicz for the 205 belt. I'm going to really enjoy this fight. Whoever Michael Chandler faces. Because like I said, he always brings it. He's always ready to scrap. And he's always ready for that challenge. Next up. The Schmo asked about Jon Jones and what's the update. Jon Jones and Dana White had a conversation, and Dana White mentioned in this interview that it was one of the best conversations he's had while Jon Jones has been in the UFC. That's great to hear. But it still doesn't clear up much. Because when you got Francis Ngannou in the picture and the run that he's been on, you cannot deny that he should fight for that UFC heavyweight belt. In my opinion, that fight must happen. You can't just say Jon Jones gets to skip everybody just because he was dominating everybody at 205. We don't know what he's like at heavyweight. We can have assumptions. I mean, we're obviously assuming that this guy is going to do great things at heavyweight. Just by looking at his frame and by looking at his fight IQ and all these great things about him. But I think this is the exact move that the UFC needs to do because it gives legitimacy to having a fight win streak and all these great things and doing great things in the weight division that you're in. Because in other sports, which I compare to, it's not like the Lakers can win every single game and then all of a sudden, just because one team has the more flashier players or a team that won in an era before gets to skip them. No, they went on that win streak. Francis Ngannou went on that win streak. So that means that he gets to fight for the belt. And also, it might just be better for Jon Jones. We see him train online. We see him lifting the weights. But like Luke Rockhold, who we saw fight at 205. Yes, you can put on all the muscle that you want. Like Luke Rockhold looked like he was made out of stone. He was gigantic at 205. But was he able to carry that weight? Was he able to move and maneuver the same way he did at the lower weight class? I don't think so. I didn't see it. That might be other issues because he came into that fight with some injuries, and I believe he had staff at that at that time. That's why he had the leg covering on his knee or ankle or something. No, it was his like calf, I believe, something like that. But he came in with issues. But was he ready, and had he trained with that bulked up weight? This might give Jon Jones more time to prepare. So like I mentioned earlier, Adesanya is facing Blachowicz on March 6th at UFC 259 to fight for the UFC's 205-pound belt. This is going to be a fun fight. And there's a couple of reasons why it's going to be fun. Obviously, it's going to be a good striking match. These guys are two people that like to stand and trade. But it's also fun seeing Adesanya come from his weight class and go up to 205. It's just fun to see that. And it's a great learning opportunity for us, MMA nerds, to figure out if his kickboxing background, while he was fighting at heavyweight in kickboxing, if that translates to mixed martial arts. Because I don't know if you guys know, but Adesanya used to fight at heavyweight in his kickboxing matches. Will that translate to MMA? He's a big guy. I remember at one point, this might have been a year or two ago, when people were saying Adesanya was way too small to fight Jon Jones. And I mentioned this in a previous podcast of mine, but when he went on the Food Truck Diary with Brendan Schaub, we saw how big he was. He's almost the same height, or maybe a bit taller than Schaub. And that's a guy that fought at the weight class, was beating people. And Adesanya was almost, maybe even a little bit more taller than him. Which, I mean, kind of put a stick or put a wrench in everybody's, whatever that expression is. It made people see that this guy is no joke, and this guy could fight Jon Jones. It's going to be a real fun fight. We're going to break it down when we get closer to that date. So next thing, I talked about in the previous podcast of mine, but Dana White mentioned this while talking to the Schmo. Is Weili Zhang going to fight Rose Namajunas? That's a question that a lot of people have had. Dana White came out a little while ago and said that Rose didn't want to fight Weili Zhang because she doesn't want the belt. Her husband and head coach, Pat Barry, said that this was all false, and Rose actually did want to fight for the belt and doesn't mind the pressure at all. Now Dana White's saying that hopefully he can make that fight. So it's kind of going back and forth a little bit. And like I mentioned before, it's weird to hear Dana White talk bad about his fighters sometimes and then in a couple weeks, mention them again in a good light. It's like you're defacing your product a little bit. Saying that Rose is not ready or doesn't want to fight because she can't handle the pressure. And now you're saying that, yeah, maybe we can make the fight. It's back and forth. It shows us again that Dana White is using these tactics to get his fighters to fight. So that's going to be a fun fight if it does happen. Weili Zhang, who we all know, is always game, is always ready to fight. I mean, she had that exciting fight with Joanna. Some people are saying it's fight of the year. One of the most amazing fights. It was crazy. It was ridiculous. So then, quickly, Dana White was asked if Nick Diaz should ever return. I made a video about this a long time ago, and we chatted about Nick Diaz maybe coming back and saying that, and his manager, I believe, was mentioning there's a really good chance that Nick Diaz could come back, and he is going to come back. But when Dana White was asked about this, he said that, I don't know if he really wants to see, like when he mentioned it, he said he doesn't know if he wants to see Nick Diaz come back. There's multiple reasons that he gave, but one of them just saying that maybe he's not ready from some of the stuff that he's seen on social media. He just believes that Nick Diaz is not right for the UFC anymore. Now, again, we just talked about Rose Namajunas and Weili Zhang, and maybe some of the tactics that he's using to get Rose Namajunas back in the octagon. Maybe this is a tactic to get Nick Diaz back into the octagon. Maybe he'll take a pay cut. Maybe he'll fight a fighter that he doesn't really want to fight, but the UFC will like him to fight. This might be a tactic that the UFC and Dana White is using. So last thing I want to, one of the last things that I want to talk about is Colby Covington and George Masvidal. Dana White was asked about this. He gave a quick response. The question was, is Colby Covington going to fight George Masvidal? And also mentioned the fact that George Masvidal might have said that he didn't want to fight Colby Covington. I believe that's what Colby Covington was saying. So the schmo asked Dana White. Dana White said that, no, I don't think Masvidal is scared to fight him or anybody. So we might see that fight. That will be a fun fight. And we might see what George Masvidal is capable of with a full training camp to fight a wrestler with that caliber. We've seen Colby Covington in the past use a lot more of his striking, use it to pepper his opponents. But unlike him, Kamaru Usman has a lot more power, uses his wrestling similar to Colby Covington. But this might be a good test, like I just said, for George Masvidal to really show us what he's capable of doing in a full camp against a wrestler like these two. It'd be a real fun fight. I mean, the back and forth talking that they'll have is going to be real fun. I mean, these two trained together. They said they were best friends at one point. At one point, they would never even fight each other, but now there's this bad blood between one another. They also fight at two different camps now. I mean, there's a whole storyline that goes into this. And actually, they might be the coaches for the Ultimate Fighter. Some people have reported that they could be the coaches. I mean, that will really give a boost to a show that needs it. I don't know many people that watch that. I haven't watched The Ultimate Fighter in a very long time. This could be the boost that they need. But I mean, we say that every single time. When Conor McGregor came on, we're like, okay, this might be the boost that the show needs. When name whoever it is came onto the show, we thought, wow, this might be the boost that the show needs, and it will make it the Ultimate Fighter that we once loved and we always watched. But it never happens. Maybe the show's not working. Maybe the show will never work. But Dana White and the UFC will never stop running that show, because time and time again, they mentioned that was the catalyst that blew the UFC wide open and made them the number one mixed martial arts organization in the world. So just because of that, they have this kind of loyalty to the Ultimate Fighter brand that won't allow them to ever stop producing the show. I mean, I think the costs of the show have been cut down a lot, because now I think they're going to film it at the Apex, where they're filming Dana White's Contender Series, where they're having the UFC Las Vegas fights. So it might cut down on a lot of the cost. Might be a lot cheaper to make the show. And I've also heard some rumors that the show might have an online only presence. Maybe it might be on the UFC Fight Pass only. I don't know. That might happen, might not. I need to read more into it. There might be some news that came out. But like I said, I don't know many people that watch it. I don't watch it at all. I'm going to be honest with you. I love the Dana White Contender Series. I watch that all the time, especially the time slot that it has. The time slot that the Dana White Contender Series has is a real gap for me, because I am such an avid mixed martial arts fan. So, I mean, when I'm flipping through the channels and I just see fights, I'm like, oh, wow, in the middle of the week, why not? It's just fun, right? It's a good time slot that it had. Also, I think the drama and all that kind of stuff, we got so many of these Kardashian-like shows coming out that having fighters kind of do the same exact thing as these Big Brother stars and all this kind of stuff is not that appealing to me. I watch these guys do what they do best, and that's fight. And I don't think the top talent is going to be at the Ultimate Fighter anymore. Why would you? The Tuesday Night Contender Series, or the Dana White Contender Series, is, I mean, I think it's the best route to get into the UFC now. There were 3 routes at one point. You can get in from some regional show where Dana White sees you or he hears about you. You can get in from the Ultimate Fighter, and now you're getting in from the Contender Series, which I think is the best way to get in. You still got to have some regional fights. That gives you the experience, which is great. But then also, it kind of shows you off to the world. So if the UFC doesn't pick you up, some other organization might. We've seen that happen a couple times where the UFC said no, Dana White said no, and then I think Bellator might have picked some guys up. So it gives you that exposure. Lastly and quickly, I just wanted to talk about MMA becoming an Olympic sport. Khabib seems hell-bent on getting this done. But I don't think it's the right move for MMA. We see so many issues with the NCAA and all these organizations that don't pay their athletes. You're going to have these amateur athletes dedicate all this time to fight in the Olympics, which, first of all, there's no way that the MMA that we see in these major organizations is going to be the same MMA that we see in the Olympics. It just can't happen. You can't have someone fight that brutal style in almost like a tournament fashion. I know it was done in the past, but I don't think the Olympic audience is ready for that. I don't think the Olympics is ready for that. Having these guys have all these injuries and then maybe fight in a couple weeks later. I don't even mean back to back what they used to do. Like UFC 1, 2, and 3 and all those kind of where they fought like back to back the same day. I don't even mean that. I think it's still brutal if they fought once and then next week they fought again. They might do the boxing thing where it's like headgear and all that kind of stuff. But even then, MMA is just so brutal. So we got to have some modifications in the sport if it's going to the Olympics. Second, you're going to have these people dedicate this whole time to get an Olympic medal when they could be fighting in amateur organizations, actually making money and actually creating a path for themselves to one of the big organizations. I just think it's better for the athletes. I think it's better for everybody if MMA doesn't go to the Olympics. Like, are we going to get professionals in the Olympics? Like, could Conor McGregor fight for his country actually in the Olympics and get a gold medal there? I don't know. It's got to be a modified rule set. But then that creates other questions. Is your Olympic record hold any value when you're fighting in one of these major organizations? Because you're fighting with these mixed rules, does it mean anything? Like, I don't think it will go to your pro record, but does it mean anything, right? Like, maybe you can't, not throwing elbows is like normal. That's fine, right? But let's say it's like karate combat style, where when I take you to the ground, I can only punch you for like 10 seconds or whatever that thing is. And then we have to stand you back up. Maybe something like that. But does that really hold any merit to the actual sport of mixed martial arts? Like, do you think that those skills can apply? I don't know. That's just hypothetical. But the question is like, does it really matter? Because the sport's not MMA anymore. These are all things that we need to think of before just jumping the gun and saying that MMA needs to be an Olympic sport. all things that we need to consider. But hey, I want to be open-minded. I want to make sure that I get all the information before making assumptions like this. And when the information does come out, I love to talk about it here and discuss it with you guys. But this is how I see it being played out in this moment. So this was a great video by the Schmo. Gave us really good insights. I mean, Dana White was super open in this, which was great. He gave us a lot of good information for the year of 2021. It's going to be fun. We got Conor McGregor coming back. We got Michael Chandler maybe going to fight Dan Hooker. We got all these fun fights coming up. We got Adesanya. We got John Jones that might come in. I mean, this year is looking great. And we're going to have a lot of fun covering it. Especially me. I'm going to have lots of fun talking about it. So if you guys could, like, subscribe, give 5 stars on the different platforms. It really helps. Please comment below if you're watching this on YouTube. And let me know what you think is going to happen in the year 2020. What are you most excited about? And I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day. It means a lot. And thank you for listening. This has been the Body Punch Podcast. My name is Naz. Bye.